Hello, Carver. This is your headmaster speaking, BenBen. We are the #1 developmentally disabled elementary school in the entire United States. Having said that, given this recent pandemic, we feel estranged from our students and we want to give back. The board of directors and myself have agreed to a spending bill, which will allow for this new beautiful swing set to be placed on our playground grounds for you to enjoy back when things get to normal sometime in 2025. In addition, the following spending bill also includes these programs to help benefit the students and to maximize their future. $85 million to Cambodia, $134 million to Burma, $1.3 billion to Egyptian Russian military equipment. I know some of our students are interested in tech and engineering, so that's beneficial should they defect to Russia. $25 million to democracy gender programs in Pakistan. I know some of our students are experiencing gender dysphoria or interested in transitioning. It's lovely. If they're Pakistani, all the better. $105 million to Belize, El Salvador, Guatemala, Honduras, Nicaragua, and Panama. I know that we have Taco Tuesdays, and this is okay. $105 million to the Kennedy Center. Some of us here are thespians, I think. Some of us in the crowd, yeah, are students or youngsters. $154 million to the National Gallery of Art. Any artists we have here? Carol, your son John. John, hey, I see him on the Zoom. Hey, John, can you tilt his head? John, pay attention. John, you're an artist. No, you're an artist. $25 million to combat Asian carp, $2.5 million to count the number of amberjack fish in the Gulf of Mexico. Math is very important, it's fundamental. Finally, $566 million in construction projects for the FBI. The FBI protects those with cerebral palsy and developmental disorders, just as it protects every other student in the United States. Enjoy your swing set. Welcome to the BenBen Show. I'm your host, BenBen. We have a lovely show for you, but first, a word from our sponsors. This episode of the BenBen Show is brought to you by Your Tax Dollars Hard at Work. $10 million in gender studies programs to Pakistan, part of the COVID relief bill. I wonder if Jennifer Pritzker is part of that bill, or has anything to do with that. You know Jennifer Pritzker with the Pritzker family, the Hyatt heiress, former lieutenant colonel in the Army National Reserves, now billionaire, transgender, also still heiress. Recently donated $1 million to the Lurie Children's Hospital for gender and sex development. All about people making decisions for themselves, but not so cool about children's sexual development style. It's a little strange, but hey, all for it, right? At least we get $600. We're also sponsored by the newest member of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Turtle Mitch. Spineless. Lindsey Graham's spineless too. Totally agrees with the bill, saying, hey, this is better than nothing. The amount of stuff that I listed off in that little bit in the beginning, unbelievable. I mean, how is that even acceptable that we have people here that are, losing their jobs, their businesses, have no money to pay rent, and we're like, you know what? If we just give them $600 for Christmas, they'll shut up. What are you talking about? This is insane, and it keeps getting worse. This is the problem. The more Band-Aids we put on it, and I noticed that the Band-Aids are getting pushed out further. They say there's going to be a bill, and they keep pushing it out because the reality is, the longer this pandemic goes on for political purposes or what have you, the more Band-Aids you need. If you keep putting them in the cycle, the more Band-Aids you need, to the point where you have no choice but to become a socialist country. You've made it socialist. You've dug yourself in such a hole with rent and the printing of money. Here's the problem. You give someone $600. 35% of all the money in circulation has been printed off in the last 10 months. You keep printing off money. That $600 you give people, never mind it's coming out of their taxes, it's nothing. It's diluted. It's not really $600. All the people that are saving money, their value of their money goes down. The people that make money are those that own, they get paid, the billionaires in New York right now. The government of New York, the city of New York, is actually telling people that they intend to foreclose, or they already have kicked people out of buildings, but all the buildings have been abandoned by businesses is going out, landlord's taking it over. Then the landlord can't pay because they haven't, you get what I'm saying? Landlord kicks you out. They have no tenant because they can't facilitate that store being, or that space being open. So then the government takes it over. And they want to convert it to residential housing. You know how nuts this is? We're getting so much closer as this pandemic continues to a socialist state. It's unquestionable. It's almost like an end game of, you know what? Tech is going to get us there. The end game is clear. I've mentioned this before about AI, kind of subverting the, blue collar worker, the white collar worker, just in general, the GDP per capita. It's people, if you know what the end game is, why not just speed it up? There's no roadblocks except for time. So let's just speed it up. Use this pandemic to push it forward. I mean, it sounds ridiculous, but in a nutshell, when Trump is threatening the COVID bill, and he says raise it to 2,000, I think that's absolutely lovely. But even still, this is like, it doesn't solve anything. It's not really $2,000. The way deflation of currency and inflation works in terms of prices, it takes time. But as this goes on and this becomes the norm, as we dig ourselves further into rent debt, there's no way to get out of it. You can't move on. You get what I'm saying? Like, you just keep going into this thing. It's like we're printing money. Where's the bailout coming for all the derivatives down the line? The landlord owner, the person that owns the building. You see like these proxies that are not getting paid? Land ownership is a business. Rent is a business, just owning a piece of property and renting it out at a higher rate than your mortgage or what you pay. Or maybe you own it outright just to offset your property taxes and make some sort of income. Whatever your spread is, you're not making anything. And people are okay with this because it's a virus. People are okay telling you that there's 1 million people that have died in the United States, and it could have been 2 million more if it weren't for these lockdowns, even though for some reason we keep doing them and redoing them, and they don't seem to be working. But let's say we didn't do any. Said 2 million deaths more. Okay, just in the United States, even though there's 1 million people worldwide that have died total. Okay, but then what about collateral damage? How do you associate those deaths in terms of the collateral damage to protecting against COVID? Because let me tell you, if it's just 2 million more people that would have died, and this is extreme probably, that's like the high end of some bizarre inflation that ignores comorbidities and the death numbers that are already inflated. But let's just say, how do you compare that with the 250 million people that have already died in third world countries due to hunger because of, and lack of facilities and resources because of the COVID pandemic, the shutting down of resources? How do you justify that? 250 million people have died because of COVID, not from the disease, because of our response to it. No one cares because they're poor. When Bill Gates referred to vaccines and pandemics lowering the population pool, like the overpopulation problem, and I didn't understand what he meant. Is this what he's referring to? This UN report shows it could be upwards of 1 billion people that die if this continues through 2021. 1 billion people wiped off the face of the earth that no one talks about. Everyone just talks about how horrible it is to have your restaurant open, or how the new strain could affect children and spread and then kill them more. It's possible. All this fear mongering. Fear mongering does multitude of things. One, it creates a false fear, an unnecessary fear in terms of the free market. In other words, if you were to just open everything up and drop all the mandates, all the occupancy rules, which business can say, we just drop all that. But you mandate masks. Let's say you keep masks and social distancing real. The psychological fact of that slows the economy down. It discourages discretionary spending. No one wants to go to businesses and spend their money wearing a mask. It's not fun. People are less likely to just like, I want to go to the golf range and hit balls. It's like, well, you have to wear a mask. Even though I'm in this booth, and so, yeah, you have to wear a mask. Like, do you see what I'm saying? Like, what's the point? Might as well just stay home. That's the problem. Everything is pushing people to become completely dependent on the government. It's scary. It's scary because it's not real. It's synthetic. And then like New York telling you they want to declare martial law, essentially. I'm not talking about like the Third Amendment quartering act and stuff like that. You know what I mean? But I'm saying like you can't tell people, deny them their right to prosperity, kick them out of their business, tell the landlords to go F themselves, and then take over the property and convert it into retail when they've actually said this. Like when the numbers go down and the value of the property is truly, it's discounted cash flows, future cash flows. When things are normal, what could we make? Jesus, we can charge X amount of dollars, turn it into Section 8 housing or something, and make the taxpayer pay for it. It's disgusting. And that's what we're doing. You don't realize it, but all these COVID bills, if you require the $600, you really need it. You're paying for it. Not only are you paying for it as a poor person or someone that's been afflicted by the virus itself. I do notice this light goes on the computer. It might show some light discrepancy because I'm doing this later in the day than normal. Not only are you receiving the $600 and paying for it through your taxes, it's diluting the value of the numbers in the economy in terms of cash flow, because 35% of the total amount of cash in the system has been printed in the last 10 months. And this devalues the currency and raises the prices of things. So the people that are already in power, they're earning from your, poverty, they can still make money in this economy. They're getting rich at your expense. And you think that you're being salvaged by this handout from the government. You're not. If the government gives everyone a ladder and they put it into the ocean, you're not really climbing out of it. I used this kind of anecdote in the last podcast. Everyone gets a step up. It's not a step up. That's why the free market works, because there are winners and losers at different times. Hawthorne, families are always rising and falling. You can't create an artificial subsidized middle class. You can't do this. But in a pandemic time, you can't say that the economy X, Y, and Z needs X, Y, and Z, but then revert back to COVID protocols for the reasons for free money. Why don't you just let it run? Let it run. How much worse can this get? I know how much worse it can get. If we care so much in our spending bill about foreign entities and foreign aid, why on earth are we denying the normal flow of mercantilism, of normal free markets? 250 million people have died because of it. If we really care about foreign aid, that is the ultimate foreign aid. That the collateral damage of foreign aid, or lack thereof, is 250 million against 1 million American lives dead. How do you justify anything associated with a spending bill that doesn't acknowledge that or fix that problem? The way you fix that is through proxy. You stop all these bullshit rules, cut the mask shit down, just cut it out, it's over. The fear-mongering is actually synthesizing a new way of social engineering, it's synthesizing a social engineering by which people act in the markets, and it's stay at home. It's less contact with people, particularly families. You're engineering all these students now to stay away from each other. Zoom this, Zoom that. Businesses are trying to say, hey, stay at home. We don't need you for your data processing job. But you know what? We're going to give you less money. So on the weekends, you're not really going anywhere. You're still staying at home playing video games and just stuck in your shitty life, with your shitty world, with taxes rising on your income to pay for this subsidized middle class, which means you will never get out of the rat race. You are essentially Neo plugged into the Matrix, a light bulb that just keeps feeding the system. And you don't think about it when you have kids, or your next meal is, you don't know where it's coming from. But long term, scary. It's very scary. I'm frightened. I'm frightened by all of this. I do appreciate Trump fighting. And if we don't get this bill passed by the 29th of December special session, it's going to go into next year. And this is the push of like, you can't keep having all these bills, all these stimulus. We're going to be put into a forced welfare state, as I suggested. This universal minimum income, basic income, UBI, is going to be forced upon us. The stimulus checks will be converted into just the status quo when this is all said and done, because it's not going away. You can't have 2 years of compromised GDP. Now, this is what's interesting. The markets are heavily weighted towards sectors like tech and stuff like that don't require this kind of like brick and mortar. Brick and mortar is not a major part of our equity markets anymore with tech. So consumer goods skipping the like brick and mortar, process, being served directly to your house, subscriptions as a service, software, online, everything kind of like perpetuates this equity market that's valued based off of intangible assets. And it goes against like the Warren Buffett's idea of value investing, the normal thing of like tangible book value. Well, tangible book value doesn't mean anything anymore because Amazon, Facebook, it's the value of the person. And the interesting thing is your value as a consumer is getting more and more expensive, or more and more ideal for these companies, but your ability to consume is being compromised. And the only way to split the difference is for taxes to be raised. So basically, it creates a huge barrier to entry for the rich. No one can break that mold. The Politburo, the powers that be will not be able to be undermined or questioned, because in order for you to facilitate your life, your taxes are going to be so enormous you'll never be able to save for your family. The transfer of wealth that's happening right now is also a building of a wall to deny transfer of wealth or wealth building for future generations, at least in this country. It's frightening. This is in the United States is happening as we speak. It's vile. Again, I think that people like Tim Pool, Steven Crowder is a bit more comical like me, but Tim Pool I think is someone who's good to watch and to listen to about this problem in terms of like real journalistic facts and factoids about the process. Crony capitalism has been going on for years, but the stakes are higher than ever before because special interests have, I think more than ever, have their heads wrapped around the dragon's throat. They have an in to kind of bifurcate executive, judicial, and legislative branches in a way that like compromises that tripod of measure, and I think that's scary. It's frightening. It's scary, and there's nothing to say. I mean, there's nothing more to say about it. On a lighter note, actually, there's tons to say about it, but I could just go on and ramble. It's all hypothetical conjecture until it happens. You just see your dollar becoming worth less and less, and then taxes getting higher and higher. You're forced to. You become this light bulb in the matrix. This is what happens. It's awful. This is what it is. What am I wearing? This is a Monte Carlo collar Dan shirt. Dan Roma. They have a company off of the Plaza de España, actual brick and mortar. I think they're struggling. So if you're interested in buying really expensive shirts, I think the Sea Island cotton is their claim to fame. Go for it. But if you have a longer neck or you're taller like me, I think it helps. Whew. But yeah, I also think it helps if you're taller. I believe, depending on what your waist to or what your torso to leg look is, the lapels on your jacket, I find the lower they are, you can get away with that if the silhouette of your jacket is tailored appropriately, i.e. a lower button stance. But if not, higher notches in your lapel, like more towards the top end of the shoulder, tend to be more aesthetic, and a longer, lower button stance, I think, than the general idea of at the waist, particularly if you have a longer torso than legs, or a variant in between, just because you get all this extra fabric between your belly button and the bottom of your jacket, and it almost gives you this pear shape. It's not aesthetically pleasing to what you look like if you're an athlete or someone. It doesn't accentuate that. People often say like you shouldn't wear your suits like jeans. There's sometimes you see people sprayed on suit pants and wool that you can see the rimples of fabric behind your knee. That's how tight it is. Like, well, it's not supposed to be made that way. But the same token, I think certain aesthetical advantages to kind of like beating down the classic presumption of aesthetics, particularly when you come to having a jacket made for you. Why in God's name would you presume that the standard measurements for retail or off the rack would be applicable to you when you're trying to maximize your look? Not maximize what it looks like on your body in terms of being sprayed on to fit you perfectly. What enhances your aesthetic the most? Lower button stance, for me, I think does it. I think you'll see that with someone like Cam Newton, the NFL player. Don't necessarily agree with some of his egregious sins in fashion in terms of color patterns and how eccentric he is, but in terms of the actual cut of some of his suits that are less Superman pajama-ish looking, you'll notice at the very least this notch and the length of his jacket in terms of the button stance are generally lower to accentuate the reverse triangle look. And I think that's beneficial. Too many people have this boxy English cut. I think that there's a bridge between the English cut and like an Italian cut with English tailoring that could be like broached in a way that doesn't offend even the most classical person. It just enhances. And really, you have to, this goes to like referring to like your own aesthetic versus like your tailors. Don't trust people like doctors, like, oh, I think this would look best on you. Understand what they mean by that before you just say yes. And whenever you get a suit made or anything made for you, get one. And then use that as like the litmus test of like their ability, and then determine whether they can replicate that. Quality control is key. Sometimes tailors will put so much effort into the first one to get you hooked, and then the second one, there's these errors. It's okay to have some variations and try different things, but if they're not intentional and there's a huge quality control problem, that's an issue. Oh, that was a random tangent we went off of. Biden camp's transition, pushing back on the Twitter reset. So Obama, his Twitter followers for his POTUS account transferred over to Trump. Not that Trump wouldn't have gotten his own, cadre of followers, given some of his more incendiary comments. Never mind just Trump being Trump in general. But Biden's upset that he's going to start from zero. And the funny thing is, I wouldn't be surprised if he has a ghostwriter or ghost Twitter, because you don't embarrass yourself having no one. He has to be able to say funny things. He has to. Because in juxtaposition, if you're the Democrats, you have to be able to show some connection to the younger voters, more so than just progressive ideology that's idealistic. You have to show that you're not you don't see Biden tweeting. Tweeting is not going to be his thing, right? So wait for some strange disconnect between the way he talks and his tweets. I think that's going to happen, unquestionably. Let's see what else here. Oh yeah, this is interesting to me. Russia is always to blame for everything related to hacking, foreign interference. The SolarWinds thing, that's Russia. 2016 elections, Russia. China seems to be a direct attack since nationalism and populism has become kind of part of the Trump people's kind of rhetoric of just, for the good of the people, there's been this separation between the Democrats condemning, anyone saying anything bad about China, which would be pro open borders, pro, destruction of the American worker, lowering wages, blah, 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 pro globalist, right, agenda. It seems like everything's Russia, 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 but this is interesting. China's never mentioned, except by Trump. And two cryptocurrencies, Bitcoin and Ethereum, their networks run through the Chinese Communist Party. They're controlled by the Chinese Communist Party. The third cryptocurrency in that cadre is Ripple. XRP. And XRP is a competitor, of course, but they're being cited and sued by the SEC, which could eventually bring Justice Department complaints. I wouldn't be surprised if it didn't. Again, referring to somehow the Justice Department, the deep state might be in bed with China in many degrees. China's totalitarian state is kind of like a standard for how the United States is moving, functioning away from a democracy. We might look like a democracy on paper, but in the future, no. And China is the perfect example of that, about how to control a populace through the means of information and censorship, from Baidu all the way down the search engine. You get what I'm saying? Like it seems like it's slowly happening here. We're becoming like an ancillary province of China, or maybe never officially, but it definitely looks like we're reading that playbook, and it's not a good thing. SEC is going after Ripple. Ripple knew this was going to happen. The question that the SEC has, they've said that they believe Ripple, because it sold 1.3 billion in unregistered security offerings, that it is a security, not a cryptocurrency, not a currency, period. The Howry test of 1946 Supreme Court case, defined a security as an investment of money in a shared enterprise with an expectation of profits from others' work. In other words, I buy a warrant, a bond, stock in Google. My profits are directly related to the earnings or derivative thereof of the work from that company. My benefit from owning that in terms of speculation is off of that company's future cash flows, or just the stock price itself, long-term intrinsic value, future cash flows, yes. But, stock price correlated to the work that company's doing. And my stock price references as a derivative measure all those securities I could buy. It's not the security itself, it's the future of that company and what that company's prosperity looks like that affects the price of that security. Does that make sense? A currency is not attached to that entity. It is not securitized by a company itself. The difference between a security, I guess, and a currency is kind of like a national, a corporation versus a country. And I think in some ways it's kind of a conflation in terms, because you can look at like the Bank of England and Soros and see that as a prime example of, think of the Bank of England, think of their economy as a security, and going after and trying to attack the British pound, corner the British pound. It's the same idea behind buying stock that's being diluted, or buying up stock that you feel is severely undervalued for any particular reason, or using a leveraged buyout and using debt to purchase equity, right? To take control of a company on the cheap. And then using the company's assets to sell it off to then pay back the debt, but then you get control. Basically, it's an equity play through debt. I think that's confusing to a lot of people, but there is a criticism to be made. Is like, why is a cryptocurrency any different than a dollar? And I think in that sense, a dollar is directly attached to the United States economy in many respects. And I know it's a global currency that's being used everywhere, but their nation states, sovereign states do affect that. So there is a securitization somewhat in terms of how the currency flows. But the SEC's argument is that it is it's a security, unlike Bitcoin, unlike Ethereum, and that its future prosperity is based off of Ripple, off of the parent company that created it. I'm not sure that that's the case. I want to go back to something I said briefly regarding the gender studies program in Pakistan, which I think is like very strange. How do you justify that, like, when people are struggling in this country? How do you honestly justify that when people's jobs are being lost and people are like getting paid less, can't afford X, Y, and Z, the rent, moratoriums exist for this very reason. You know what's happening. You can't turn a blind eye. But then you allow for 25 million in Democrat and gender studies programs, in pro-democracy and gender studies programs in Pakistan. Who gives a shit? Why is foreign aid right here? So you have like $178 billion of direct investment in the United States, and the rest is all going out. It has nothing to do with helping people in the COVID crisis in the United States. That's insane. Why would you do that to people? Why would you lie to people? How can you honestly say this is for the benefit of the people? How could you allow one party or another, or crony capitalism or special interests to interfere in such a dangerous part of our dangerous era in our economy, in our country? Like, how can you honestly say you scream bloody murder, but then you're going to allocate $108 million to like the Smithsonian, or you're going to allocate $566 million to FBI to build new buildings, or you're going to allocate X, Y, and Z to Nicaragua, $50 million here, Cambodia? Like, what are you doing? It's insane. But the gender studies thing, I think it's particularly nefarious. I have no problem with transgender ideas in terms of like allowing adults to do what they want to do. But there's a billionaire named Jennifer Pritzker, who was a lieutenant colonel in the Illinois Army Reserves, part of the Hyatt family, Hyatt heiress or heir, I don't know, and uses this foundation called the Tawani Foundation to make all these distributions towards transgender studies, particularly for children. Does not use her name, uses the Tawani Foundation name. And I think that's a bit disconcerting. Pritzker has a net worth of $1.5 billion. The family, governor of Illinois, Pritzker. The Pritzkers are everywhere. But the Tawani money was used to launch the gender clinic at the Lurie Children's Hospital. This was announced several months before Pritzker came out as trans. The Tawani Foundation doesn't make any notion of these philanthropic donations. The cause of transgendering children or anything like that, it's not there. It's all military charities, military history, museums. It doesn't talk about this transgender stuff. The annual report section stops in 2012, the year before Pritzker's transition was publicly announced. A search of all grantees in the 2012 report yields a $25,000 donation to Lurie's Children's Hospital for the launch of new multidisciplinary gender management clinic, as well as $9,500 to the Kinsey Institute for LGBT Talk at Indiana University with Chaz Bono and Sex Exploration Week. Okay. Given the far larger June 2016 Tawani grant to the Pediatric Transition Clinic at Chicago's Lurie Children's Hospital, it's very odd there's zero evidence of current philanthropic causes for transgender stuff on the website. You go through the internet, you can't find anything. In addition to the Lurie Children's Clinic, however, Chicago Tribune announced the Tawani Foundation donated $2 million to the world's first endowed academic chair of transgender studies in British Columbia. Okay, it's interesting. There's also this conflation of gender nonconforming with transgender. It seems dangerous. Gender dysphoria does not mean that you're transgender, which I think is also a homophobic insinuation that children should begin transitioning because of gender dysphoria in early adulthood or pre-pubescence to protect their transition, the panacea of which is looking more like the identity that they wish to be. Puberty affects that, so stop or change at an earlier time. But over 93% of children that experience gender dysphoria end up becoming gay men or becoming straight. So the question, or become homosexual or straight. So the question is, why would you presume that? And the suicide rates pre and post-op and stuff like that, why would you, not going to get into the specific numbers, but suggest that there's a grave disparity between the panacea being the actual transitioning for aesthetic purposes and like the acceptance of being who you want to be. It doesn't seem to always be the case, or be the case at all, that the actual physical transformation appeases the psychological condition. But again, The children stuff, I do have a problem with. I think it's strange. Gender studies in Pakistan, just off the top of my head, suggests LGBT knowledge, reform in countries that may not be that up to date on tolerance, but also transgender programs that may directly be targeted towards children, which I think is a problem. Period. Children can't give consent. Why in the world would you have a law in Canada which allows a child to say, my mom won't let me turn into a boy, take them away from me? And that can happen. Joe Rogan is a friend who lost custody of his child, and that child was transitioned by the mother, boy to a girl, against his want. Those situations are very hard, and I think the last thing that we need to do is I beg that gender studies is just about gay rights and acceptance, and not so much about transitioning children. I pray to God. That's the only thing I have a problem with. It's like, I wanted to be a cowboy. I wanted to be Gordon Gekko when I was 12. I wanted to be a cowboy, and I wanted to travel the United States in a van. So I guess I wanted to be a hobo, an investment banker, and a cowboy. See what I'm saying? Gender never came into it, but it could have. Maybe I wanted to be Barbra Streisand. You get what I'm saying? Christening dresses for men, they're dresses, like Catholics. Yeah, transgender shit happens all the time. Just saying, it's very disconcerting. I just worry about it. And it's oh, you're so ignorant, or you don't know what you're talking about, BenBen. I'm just saying, there seems to be a social engineering thing happening. This is acceptable. This is acceptable. You're bigoted. You're so old school in your thinking. I think throwing biological sex out the window is controversial, redefining things, gender versus biological sex, controversial. But I'm not willing to throw that out the window and not have a conversation with someone. I am willing to say, actually not willing to not have a conversation about anything. But when it comes to children, to tell me that I'm uneducated, given my curriculum vitae and my past education, which again isn't based off gender studies, but my aptitude to learn something and just common sense would facilitate more consideration for my apprehension and to help me, give me some latitude to make my arguments. Just as most people are not gender studies experts, but there are doctors and people in pediatrics that completely disagree with this. And they're not gender studies experts. They're medical doctors that think that there are repercussions for giving hormone blockers. You can't reverse them. It's not simple as, oh, we're just going to stop the skeletal development of your son. He wants to be a girl, and then we can just change it later. It doesn't work that way. And so, that bothers me. I hope that's not the case in this circumstance. But I also think that money should be spent towards, you can give that to a state for rent reform or rental assistance or something. Charge-offs are coming too. Just because charge-offs this month are not down, but credit card delinquencies are up, doesn't mean that the charge-offs aren't happening in January. It's almost like there's this massive quid pro quo. Look at all your constituents and your voters. If you don't get this passed or approve this bill or say yes to it on paper, it's going to make you look bad when you're up for a re-election next term. So, in order to do it, you have to agree to transgender or gender studies programs in Pakistan. If you don't do it, no one's going to read this bill. None of your constituents have time for it. We're going to trash you in the press. That's the game. That's in general the game of politics, but this is really insidious this time. Because it's we've got you by the balls. You have to pass this stuff. Now, Trump said not only should you raise the $600, which is what is that, to $2,000, great, but, and $4,000 for a couple, great, maybe more, $500 per child, who knows what the extra is, but he also says cut the bullshit, cut the transgender studies, cut the Nicaraguan money. Yes, and if we really care about, collateral damage from COVID and foreign relief, look at the 250 million people that have died because of hunger from the UN reports. They're verified from COVID lines of, basically COVID affecting the lines of our foreign aid process and the world's foreign aid process to third world countries. And you'll see The cure is far worse than the disease itself. And you can even add, the hypothetical of 2 more million deaths in the United States, a drop in the bucket compared to the amount of people that have died because of our COVID choices in terms of protections. A drop in the bucket. I know that sounds cruel to say, but just juxtapose the number with 250 million people worldwide that have died in third world countries, and you say if we did nothing in the United States, just 2 more people would have died compared to 250, 300 million Americans. I mean, what are you talking about? Like, how do you even justify that? It's like a Martha Nussbaum problem of viscerality. Like, can't really fathom the amount of people that died in the Holocaust. So if we take that number and compare it to the people that could die in the United States, the huge number relative to the small number, people will still say, those are Americans. They're better. They're more important. Like millions of Jews died in the Holocaust. You can't extrapolate that. It's like, can you extrapolate 250 million people? Do you know how many people are on this planet? We're talking about getting to more than a tenth of the population. Like, you realize that are dead, poor, but still people. I don't judge people based on what they do for a living. I don't judge people based on their net worth. But it seems like first world countries like ours and the media seem to, and that's unfortunate. Let's see. I didn't know what Cameo was. I knew what Cameo was, sort of, the idea of getting a celebrity to call you for your birthday. But I didn't know that everyone's doing it now. Like you could have Justin Bieber do a Cameo for you, maybe. Something it's higher up. It used to be I don't know, an extra in Ghostbusters. You could that sort of thing. But now it's Charlie Sheen. So I thought it'd be funny if you're willing to pay the money, just have buy all these cameos in a row for every day, to the point where Charlie Sheen's happy Friday, Ben. I'll see you on Saturday. Yeah, can't wait for it. Or something that you find out the next Mission Impossible 25 is postponed because Tom Cruise is so dedicated to my cameos. He's I just want to say happy Sunday. I have the need for speed, and so do you, Andrew. I'll see you Monday. We are not going to continue production until the cameos are done. I think that would be cool. Really awesome. Gary Busey's cameo. Oh, it's hilarious. I'm gonna play this right here. No.
Hello, Mike. From Mom, Dad, Michelle, and Paul, I'm wishing you a happy 40th birthday on May the 1st. That's May Day. That's a heroic day of safety. You're going to go around the sun 40 times starting on May the 1st. And I wish you a great happy birthday, because there's nothing like a birthday. And I've got a confession to make. I built a hidden wall that you can't tell is a hidden wall in your attic. And I live there. I go there when I want to, and I sneak in without you knowing I'm there. I can watch you go to sleep, go to the bathroom, put on your clothes, brush your teeth, everything. I'm watching you. So get that through your head that that's my birthday gift for you. I'm constantly watching you. And happy birthday to you. Forever and always, number 40. God bless you. Ha!
Another thing, I used to question, I still do, AI in terms of the separation of self-learning from the human mind. If there's some parable, some element of it that's not completely, I don't know, maybe human frailty and emotionality is what separates the ability of a machine, even in understanding human emotion, as not ideal for the learning process or to resolve complex problems. Maybe that is what separates the human being. You don't want to necessarily remove that, from the human element. You just completely become a sociopath or a psychopath. That's part of our learning. But when I saw this Mu0 algorithm achieve state-of-the-art performance, it matched the performance of AlphaZero, the algorithm that was applied with the rules of the game. So Mu0 was able to basically watch chess shogi, go, and just like not know the rules and then figure out how to play at an optimum level and then beat AlphaZero, which is the superhuman performance algorithm that knew the rules of the game. So it learned from watching others and then outdid the machine that just knew the rules and could, I guess, run a certain level. I mean, I guess it's all about bandwidth, like how much could it possibly calculate in a certain period of time. That's all it is. One had a higher bandwidth than the other, but the other was at a detriment because it didn't know any of the rules, but I guess it had the extra bandwidth, extra ability to process learning. Could just be that, just like the separation between bandwidth and like computing power. And that was, okay, well, these rules are inherently basic, binomial, yes, no, maybe. Programs itself, and it's like it learns and it goes for it. I mean, I think that's interesting. I think that's really cool. Scary though, like what's the soul? And I don't necessarily mean that like it could mimic the human mind in that sense, because it's very good. It's this essential self-programming of basic structure. Their chess is inherently complicated, and there's different possibilities still. I don't know. I think it's interesting. Hold on one second. I gotta get a charging cord. Hold on. So yeah, that's interesting. The other thing I think is interesting is Glee actress Heather Morris had to apologize for tweeting in defense of her late co-star Mark Stanley, who was arrested for suspicion of child pornography, a large swath of it for downloading it, and then he subsequently committed suicide. But other people from Glee, Corey Monteith and Naya Rivera, have also passed since the show ended, and she felt bad that she had to, she lamented that she had to hide her feelings regarding his death relative to the other co-stars because of his criminality. Now, I think it's interesting, you know that you have to hide it for the sake of your career, and you publicly acknowledge that fact or that irony, whatever. Maybe you don't say why you can't do something publicly, because the reason you can't say it is because it'll come back to haunt you, which is what's happening right now. She had to apologize for feeling bad, which is interesting also because it means her emotions aren't justified, which is weird. You tell any woman in the world, in any other context, your feelings don't matter or you're crazy. I'm sorry for hurting other people's feelings, even though I feel bad about something. Oh, it doesn't matter. It's what the populace thinks, and he's a child molester. You just think, in general, or he has child pornography. Maybe he didn't hurt a child. In general, he's contributing to something that's awful, and because he's dead, you feel bad that you can't miss him like your other co-stars. And I mean, tell that to any woman at all. Your feelings don't matter, except for this type of thing, like the collective. When you're in politics or you're a celebrity. Your opinions don't matter. It's the collective. It's what the public image thinks of you. But if you're in a relationship with a woman and you say, I'm sorry, but my feelings mean more than you. What? Never going to happen. It's absolutely insane. That's what's funny. I think it's interesting. Like, I don't know. I've always been in relationships with people. I've been in relationships where a woman will she does something that hurts my feelings. And I tell her that my feelings are hurt. And in the process of just talking about it, too much time has passed where she's in the wrong, and now she feels that she's being criticized. And now I have to go back to neutral, or now I'm on the defense for being too critical of how she hurt my feelings. This doesn't really happen. I don't really let my feelings get hurt. But when it's obvious, I like to bring it up to balance the equation for the future of our relationship. Like, hey, what you just said, most people might find it offensive or be hurt by it. I'm going to let you know that I'm hurt by it. And then by doing it, hopefully you recognize that when you do it to me, or when I do it to you, that sometimes accidents happen and we have to just accept it and apologize as part of the deal. You can have it both ways. But sometimes, some girls, it's excuse me, I know I hurt your feelings, but I'm upset enough at the fact that I did it. Let's move on. And then they'll bring up stuff from the past to balance it, right? Nothing's ever in the moment. It's okay, well, you did this. It's they can't do anything wrong. It's so that's fair. What? What does it have to do with it? So you can never do anything wrong ever because of stuff I've done in the past? No, that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is you get 2 minutes. You get 2 minutes of me apologizing. That's it, and then I'll start bringing up shit from the past. That's just what's gonna happen. Fuck, sucks. That's women for you. I almost didn't do this podcast today. It's part of the reason why you see the darkness and the light. So yesterday, Mr. Hitchens, my cat, you might know, passed away. He was not doing well. All of a sudden, for a couple weeks, noticed some strange behavior. Last week, got progressively worse. Difficult motor skills were like getting onto the bed was difficult. Crying, going to the litter box, crying like in the room, like sitting down in weird areas, right? Affectionate though, like coming to sleep in my belly and like, purring, but clearly knew something was wrong. And so I decided, you know what? Of course I'm gonna go to the vet. This is unusual. Could have been going on longer than that, and it makes me feel bad in terms of like pain. But right when the last 24 hours were really bad, it was almost like I knew it was the right thing to do. I didn't care for like getting like almost $1,000 bill from the vet to win a situation where like you have to basically euthanize your pet. I think that's kind of weird. I don't know. It just seemed weird. Like it seemed egregious, strange, and almost like taking advantage. I don't know. Maybe not. But like it's like all these tests were run with no real conclusions, and then like they kill your pets like $80, and I'm like, I don't know. Maybe I shouldn't talk about it. I don't know. I'm just deflecting because I'm upset, but it's fine. I don't know. We want to blame someone for something when stuff like this happens, right? I blame myself. Like, what could I have done? But yeah, I had to euthanize my cat, Mr. Hitchens, yesterday, and it sucked. Really upset me. I realized crying in masks is really difficult. So people that work in the ER and doctors and stuff that deal with emotional things that they have to kind of like throw by the wayside to be professional all the time, but I'm sure it's impossible, particularly when you deal with euthanasia as a veterinarian or someone dying as a doctor or whatever. It's hard. And so I dedicate this podcast to my cat, Mr. Hitchens, who I love very dearly. Was a stray, feral cat that was caught in a storm that needed help. And so, yeah, I don't know, maybe in a sense of my condemnation of like the spending bill, the COVID relief in the beginning is kind of a direct correlation to like sometimes we need help. And, the fact that bureaucracy and like crony capitalism can still take advantage of those situations is kind of disgusting to me. Maybe that's the parable to like spending $600 when maybe the vet knew that I was going to put down to be a good person, a good cat dad. Anyway, it seems wrong, or upwards of $1,000, more than $600. It seems weird. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. I just, again, trying to like, there's no one to blame, right? There's no one there, and you go, it hurts. Yeah. So all you cat lovers out there, yeah, it's hard. Too many cats have died on me. Anyway, subscribe down below. I'll see you next week. Have a Merry Christmas. I think I'll be off, till next week, as per usual. But yeah, take care and happy holidays. All right, bye.